The UX 360 Research Summit Europe 2026 is back for its sixth edition in Berlin on the 23rd and 24th of June. UX 360 Europe is one of the Europe's leading events dedicated to advancing UX research as a strategic and business driving function. The summit brings together global speakers, practical case study, and actionable frameworks focused on the full research journey, from planning and execution to stakeholder alignment and business impact. Attendees can expect sessions on cutting-edge strategy, real-world return on investment, and the evolving role of research in today's organization. I will be there as well. And if you work in UX research, design, or product, this is truly one of the unmissable UXR events in Europe. And as a listener of the UX Research Club podcast, you get 15% off on your ticket with the code UXRC15, UXRC15. All the information will be in the note of this podcast. Hello everyone and welcome. This is Emmanuel and you are listening to the UX Research Club, the podcast dedicated to the field of user research. This new year, a new season, and yes, we are starting the season 4 in which we'll continue having conversation with guest experts sharing insight from their area of specialism. The new episode will be released as usual on the last Wednesday of each month. So, who is this podcast for? It is for everyone interested in UX research, product development, and digital transformation. Whether working in a large organization or a startup, this is for you. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Mujtaba Hameed. Mujtaba is an anthropologist by training and a seasoned innovation consultant with 10 years of consulting experience. He's currently a project director at S3-E8 innovation consultancy, where he's worked on strategic research projects for companies such as Apple, Meta, Google, Spotify, and much more. Passionate about the power of ethnography, Mujtaba has conducted in-person fieldwork from Tokyo to LA and everywhere in between. He has become an expert in using AI not to speed up research, but to dive deeper into the human side of it. When not nerding out over ethnography, you will find him exploring niche YouTube rabbit holes, writing his newsletter, training in Muay Thai boxing, and enjoying a good poem. Topics close to his heart are the value of in-person research, the best way to use AI tools and to cut through the hype, changing culture of tech and the challenges it presents to UXR, the underappreciated value of anthropology as a social science lens, as opposed to more popular established fields such as psychology. So, hello Mujtaba, how are you? How are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well. Good to be here. We've been talking for a while and I've been really following the progress of the podcast and of course your book. So it's very exciting for me to be talking to you now and talking about the craft.
We've been meeting so many times. Every time we say, you need to come to the podcast. But we never find the time. We're all very busy. But we manage New Year, new resolution. I managed to get you on the podcast. And I'm very excited because you are an expert in qualitative and anthropology research. So for me, it's something which is very close to my heart. So I'm so happy to have you today on the UX Research Club. So for the audience, for the listener, could you tell them a little bit about your background and what drew you to research?
Yeah, absolutely. So I initially studied a combined course for my undergraduate, which was anthropology and archaeology. And I had no experience of either of those subjects at all. The only reason I wanted to study that was because I wanted almost like an American style liberal arts education. I was interested in so many things. And I was always, I didn't want to just choose one aspect of life to study, or of academia to study, rather. And it's quite funny because as an adult, last couple of years, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, which explains a lot. I was always interested in things. And I found this course that was, all about all of human culture, all of human history kind of thing. So I was like, even me, with my diverse interests, I can probably stay interested in this. Yeah, it was with that approach that I went to the library and I just sort of took out two books, one about anthropology, one about archaeology. And then when I was applying for university, it just so happened that for the college that I ended up studying at, both of the professors who wrote those books were my teachers, completely by chance. So it was extremely strange, but maybe it was written down somewhere in the books of fate.
Yeah, sometimes you meet incredible people. You read something and you meet the people, which is quite extraordinary. You never imagine you will meet those people in flesh, you know?
Quite so, quite so. And then you're in a tutorial with them where it's just you and one other student and them, and then you're like, this is surreal. This is so strange, but it's life, I suppose.
So how did you actually decide to move to UX research? Because, you've done anthropology, archaeology. So what was the shift? At which moment, in your journey, did you really switch and say, this is what I want to do?
Sure. Well, I began my career sort of over 10 years ago now in innovation consulting. And again, this was a profession I knew nothing about, but my attempts to be a poet and filmmaker were not really paying the bills. So I had to get a real job. And I asked my friends who knew me very well, I was like, what do you suggest I do? I have always assuming I was living a bohemian life. I wouldn't need any money. I was very idealistic. And separate friends independently suggested this profession of innovation consulting, which I didn't know what it was. And I went to a recruiter who specialized in this sort of thing. And I said, look, here's my experience. I've got this anthropology degree and I, have been making these like drama pieces, film pieces, poems. I really don't know what I'm doing. But he was like, it's fine. We can get you either an internship or a entry-level job at these kinds of places. And then I started that profession, and the place I worked was a boutique consultancy that specialized in like customer-led growth. And a lot of their methodologies involved research. And there was an overlap with my anthropological interests, but it was more on the market research side of things. So, more sort of focus groups and I guess expert interviews, that kind of thing. And then a lot of facilitation, so workshops and that kind of thing. And then through that, I was exposed to this whole world of agencies and things of that nature. And to cut a long story short, I discovered that there was a real kind of profession of people who were applying quite interesting and deep understanding of people to problems. And the kinds of problems they were sort of solving, to me, were more interesting on the tech side of things. Now, at that initial consultancy, we were mainly working with big established FMCG or like financial services places and in different kinds of like proposition development tasks. But I wanted to move more into tech. So I went and did a master's specializing in social cultural anthropology. And the master's I chose was at UCL, which had a whole track that was aimed at helping you use your anthropology in professional practice. And as part of that, we spoke with them. They had guest lecturers from the civil service, from the world of policy and law, and there was also people from the world of consulting. And that led me to basically work at a few more consultancies, each time moving more towards my kind of sweet spot of tech-based anthropology, essentially. And now for the last 4 years, I've been at Stripe Partners, which is a boutique innovation consultancy based primarily in London, but we have people all over the world. And we work exclusively with big tech clients, by and large. There are some smaller and different kinds of companies sometimes, but primarily I work with Instagram, Meta Reality Labs, Apple, Google, a lot of the Google kind of travel verticals and Google Maps, Spotify. So yeah, all my clients now are people like yourself, generally, UXRs or product managers. And it's just really great to be able to apply that rounded understanding of people that anthropology gives you, which I think is very special because with anthropology, you're never studying a person. Like, there is no such thing as a person. It's always people, always kind of connected. And maybe this is where you and I can have a bit of a debate because I believe you have a psychology background, right?
Yes.
And I always like to say that psychology is a little bit like my bête noire kind of thing, where it is very dominant in how people perceive the world. But
Well,
I
that
think
depends exactly because when you do psychology, it depends which approach you take. You can be very quantitative and do a lot of survey and things like that. My PhD, actually, I took an opposite approach because I thought that the quant was not answering my question. So I moved to the qual world, which was very different. When you move after your study and start doing your PhD, you start exploring different methodology. And actually, the quant couldn't answer my question. I was working with people who had stroke and suffer from language impairment. So actually, I did field work. I film people in their own home environment and try to see how they interact with their surrounding environment, actually to compensate their lexical impairment.
yes.
So it's a bit between the two. So what do you think of, the in-person, because I know this is very close to your heart. So in-person research, and I've been telling my researchers, we have to go back since COVID, we have to go back with fieldwork, we have to do fieldwork again. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish we could have a whole separate conversation just about your PhD. That sounds fascinating, your PhD.
Oh, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we do a lot of work with sort of big healthcare clients as well, and a lot of wearables research. So these questions of impairment, usability, accessibility, they're very, very close to us. But yeah, to return to your question about in-person research. So I think there's a couple of things that we can kind of talk about. So one is the reasons why it's not done so much now, and maybe the potential of it in the future, how it's used best. So my view on COVID was that COVID actually was a useful forcing function to help people understand really what each methodology is best suited for. Instead of defaulting to a particular kind of approach, we need to be reminded of are we using the right tool for the right job? And I think a lot of research in the past was like, okay, yeah, we go in person, do a field trip, blah, 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 blah. And perhaps it was used too broadly. And obviously with COVID, everybody's scrambling to do much more online qualitative approaches, and not just for cost cutting, but just because they weren't allowed to do anything else. We realized that a lot of particular types of question worked quite well just with remote research, and it's fine. But now it's swung too much the other way, where people are always trying to go for remote research. You think, we just have some depth interviews, we have some diary studies and maybe a survey, and then we can tell the answer. But now it's okay, how important is that situatedness of the end user to the question that I'm asking? For example, your PhD, it seems extremely important. So it helps you really interrogate the brief. And I think the most successful projects are the ones where, my clients, I can only speak from the perspective of a consultant, right? So when my clients have had the time and the space to be able to do a lot of that work in advance of really, really getting to sort of beyond just the demands of what their research needs to answer, but when they've had a chance to think through the methodology, that's when it's really strong because you have a really good case for being in person or not, and then what you can hope to extract from that field site. And the tricky projects are the ones where there's crazy time pressure and our clients haven't had the time to be able to do that. And even if you try to engage and work with them, and sometimes things are moving so fast that we just need to move quickly. And actually here is where in-person research can be so fascinating, because beyond just being very good at those specific situated things, being in person gives you access to more data than you can handle. It's the most data-rich method of research that I currently know. Because you yourself as a researcher have so much to experience and to tell. That's where your intuition gets sharpened. If you're, let's say, I don't know, in Japan studying video games, your experience moving through those arcades, moving through Akihabara, the electric town, moving through these kinds of fan spaces, that is all very relevant and very interesting and can influence your analysis in a way that it couldn't if you were just interviewing people remotely, or maybe asking them to send you pictures and you say, oh, okay, pictures of their favorite shops, let's do a semiotic analysis. That can take you so far. But then you have these hunches. Your hunches and your intuition are sharpened when you're in field. And then you can actually go to the data and then you can work with it in a way that gets more out of it. So it's almost a hedge against a poorly formed research question. So if you have to move quickly, if you're going to be there in person and you're a good researcher, you have solid practices, a good team supporting you, you'd have enough of a data pool to be able to be more resilient in the face of all kinds of questions. And I've experienced this myself, being sent into the research, into the field with one question, and then halfway through, the client goes, actually, there's now a very senior person involved, and they want to learn something actually a little bit different. What can we do? And I was like, well, if this was a survey with very specific parameters, then we would be in trouble. But luckily, I've been there for 2 weeks. We have all this film, we have all this evidence, we have all this other stuff. We can make it work.
Always what I'm saying about qualitative and fieldwork, you really get the unknown and you just wait to see what is emerging from your data. Whereas when you do quant, it's really top down. You just validate what you already know or your assumption. So
Yes.
to use a qual and to use the anthropology and to look at all the surrounding environment. I remember when I did some work in China and I did a home visit. It was when I was working a long time ago for EF, and they were created a little speaker for the kids to learn to speak English and with little gamification. But you had to see, first of all, their habitat. It's so different than in Western countries. It's very small. The whole family live in this family. You've got the parents, the grandparents from both sides. So you see all that, which makes sense about how they're going to interact with the tool. And you see, how so many information, and even without speaking Chinese or very little, a few words, but I had a Chinese researcher there who could translate with me after. But, without understanding the language, I could capture so much data by observing everything around it and the interaction and the gesture, how they interact with the tool. And all those things were very fascinating. You
Yes.
can't do that with quant. You can't do that with a survey. You can't do that with a remote testing.
I completely agree. And just to add to that, obviously you lead UXR function and you've built all this capability and you train people. Like I've spoken with them, I'm connected with and had coffees with people who are your proteges, right? And whenever you go in field, the researcher becomes wiser, literally in your body becomes wiser. And you mentioned China. I was out there also conducting research on for clients. And then it helped me build up a picture of what it was just like out there. And then this helped me so much in a subsequent call with a new client, which was a company creating mobility sort of vehicles. I can't say too much about it because it's still in process. But those initial conversations where they were like, China's a big market for us. What's your take on China? We've been selling this kind of product there already, et cetera, et cetera. I was able to use an observation I had from being in field that wasn't relevant to the topic before. It was about how those scooters in China for like a Vespa kind of thing for delivery, they often have I'm talking about Shanghai. They have these built-in blankets or gloves that are sort of built into the actual vehicle, and then you put your hands in there and it keeps you warm as you drive. And I found that each of them, every one was unique and different. And we'd just been in Tokyo as well, so it was a really great contrast because it was much more uniform in Tokyo. But in Shanghai, certainly, it was like those little bits of fabric were these places where people would express their personality in a very maximalist kind of way. So then I was able to link that observation and that insight about the kind of consumer tastes, as it were, to the problem of this guy I was talking to and the research he wanted to do. And it totally clicked with him, and he understood the kinds of thing that they had to ask, which was about sort of personalization, trying to be able to have like a canvas for expression for the product they make. And if I hadn't been to China, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have given some kind of typical answer, which any other consultant could have, from desk research or something. And then, that's fine for consulting. But if you're building an organization, you want your researchers to have wisdom. You want them to have expertise so that when they do get these last minute urgent requests, from the product side of things, they are able to kind of move on their feet and be kind of be smart with the data they already have instead of always commissioning new research, So it becomes twofold. You become better at gathering research, and I think you become wiser at using the research you've already got.
Yeah. Revisiting research. Normally, sometimes you already have the answers. You don't have to redo it. So you save a lot of time. So
and money.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And what do you think actually changed in the last 5 to 10 years in research? Because it's not like what it was. It was still a very young discipline. What is your opinion of the changes? And is there more value to research, less value to research?
Ooh, okay, that's a very broad question, and it depends how you slice it. I can speak from the examples of where I've seen it being used very valuably and where I haven't. So I think it all comes down to the belief that, or not even the belief, the experience that the senior leaders have, the commissioners of the research, the ultimate, the people in charge, how open they are to the experience and how much value they've experienced of research. Because, all executives know that it's important to know what the customer or the user feels, believes, says, understanding. That's very basic. But the way to get there is very, very experience dependent. A lot of work that we have to do and my clients have to do is often to advocate for their particular type of research. Because you could talk about ethnography, which is what I was telling you about, this kind of data-rich embodied approach way of doing things. But if someone who has had an experience where, unless they have like the comfort of a big sample size, unless they have the comfort of these like statistics and graphs, like it's almost like a genre of story that they like. There are some people who like realistic books about relationships and humans. There are other people who love books about spaceships and aliens. It's all stories. It's about the genre you're kind of more accustomed to. And the trick is making sure that the research is in the right genre that the person who is commissioning it will understand. Sometimes that means you're having to kind of push them maybe beyond their comfort zone a little bit. There are ways of doing that. And actually, the way I found to get this valuable research conversation and almost like convert a non-believer, as it were, is to bring them in field with me. And I've experienced this countless times. Actually, I was in Paris. What's it called? Duman or Dumanité? Like
De l'humanité.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was like the Glastonbury of Paris in a sense. Wonderful left-wing music and arts and literature festival. I was there with a very big social network, and we were trying to understand how their users capture the data, or capture sort of stuff from their environment, and then decide what to share. We wanted to understand exactly the decision process that these users of the social media had and their workflow of what is right to share, when to share, so that we could design a better product to help them share more, because we saw that they weren't sharing as much and they were consuming more than sharing. And we had a researcher in field with us as well, but we had a lot of engineers. These were full-on engineers who'd never spoken to a user. And suddenly they're there in Paris or in a festival with me, with a bunch of teenagers, watching bands, sitting down in a circle in the grass. Everybody around us is sort of partying and stuff. And then we're talking excitedly about that experience we had, that band. What did it make you feel? What did you want to capture? What did you want to share? What did you want to post? And then just in the next day when we were going through our observations, these engineers who were a little bit kind of reserved, a little bit maybe they're a bit like, okay, yeah, it's nice to be in Paris, but I have real work to do. Suddenly they were completely changed, and they were like drawing things. They were coming up with, they were jumping to solutions. They were really inspired. So yeah, I guess to sort of sum up your question, I think research is more valuable than ever now, to be honest, depending on if you set it up in the right way to make that value tangible to the people who need to use it. And that is very difficult and involves a lot of just, knowing yourself and knowing the other person and knowing how to bridge that gap.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I could visualize the trip. It's so nice. What I noticed over the years is understanding, your stakeholders, understanding their needs, where they're coming from, because they may be ready or they may not be ready, and you need to take them on the journey to get what you think is best for their decision making. So it's very interesting to bring also cross-functional team like engineers, product. You may have people for marketing. You may have people even at different level to come and see and observe. And I really see over the years, and actually when you take them on the journey, they are after the best advocate of your work because they understand the full process and they realize it's not a waste of money to do the research. And I think we are missing that a bit because we do less field work. And I think it's important to do field work again. And also to have the space for them to be outside their daily activity where they do repetitive tasks or they do their coding or they go to back in meeting for certain stakeholders. To take them outside this environment is give them like some space to think. And it's so valuable. So, it's double win because they got a break. And at the same time, it helped them to think differently.
Exactly. It sounds so wonderful, but actually that in itself does present a lot of challenges because you mentioned the idea of being pulled out of your environment, the kind of new and exciting space, and feels a bit like a break. The danger then is not being as able to link that to the daily realities. So we have to do often quite a lot of work in making sure that that last day of field work is this wonderful synthesis day where we really go back and say, what did we learn? What was the most interesting thing? And then putting it to people, making it more collaborative, like they present back to each other. And then those kind of very, very important times right after field work when the emotions are still very high, you've had a great time, you've had some experiences, had a nice dinner at the end of the week, whatever it is. We kind of roll with that momentum and then use that to try and get people to sort of advocate and start, sharing the emerging insights so that builds the appetite for that more finished and polished report. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about, because you mentioned quant and qual and the different uses of it. Well, I think increasingly what we're doing as a business, but also the kind of thing I personally am very interested in, is seeing that kind of bridge between the qualitative and the quantitative aspects, where you can understand something, like figure out like a kind of person, like a persona or like a segment, or understand a problem area or like a set of pain points. But then you figure out, well, what does that look like in the particular kind of data set? Like, what are the signals for that human need or human, right? Yeah, for that person. What are the signals for that I can find at scale? And then that's when it gets really interesting, because then you can go so nicely from this wonderful qual experience, and then you can start asking much more like, I guess, tactical questions around sizing, size of prize. You can answer that with a lot more accuracy than if you could with a more traditional top-down approach. You go bottom up to then go top down. You kind of eat the from sort of all sides of it, not just one slice at a time. And that's very exciting. And I think that AI is interesting for us because it's helping us do the analysis better. And also, this is going to be a bit controversial, but I think AI is empowering a lot of people who maybe don't know how to do research properly to get answers that are convincing on the surface, but are ultimately not so solid. And in the short term, we'll see that a lot of research budgets are being cut, which maybe suggests that research is not valuable. But I think a lot of houses are going to be built on sand, as it were. And soon it'll come back around where it's like, okay, well, how do we do this properly? Maybe we hire someone who's an expert.
Exactly. It's a bit like research tend to be the first one to go anyway, when there is restructuration, so with experience.
Yes.
But when research is positioned in a place which is adding a lot of value to the business and the business reach a certain maturity, they won't get rid of the researcher.
Yeah, no, you
So
can't.
because they see the value of the researcher. And even with AI is great, we can be faster. But AI only knows what is already there. So
Yeah.
all the unknown, AI can't do it. And that's why in-person research is so important, because we bring what we don't know, what we want to explore, and it's what is going to take us to innovation. And I'm very pro AI. I use it all the time.
Yeah.
Everything I could do with AI,
Yeah.
I'm doing it every day.
Same.
So
Same.
I'm a big advocate of AI. But I take it with with a lot of cautious, because I think it's very important to make sure it's done properly. Maybe people, and I want to reassure some people, because I can see a lot of researchers at the moment have been made redundant. It's not going to last. People are going to be rehired because things are going to fall apart if it's not built properly. So if the research is not done properly, it's exactly the same thing during the digital transformation. If you wanted to do a good digital transformation, you needed the researcher to actually help, to validate, to make sure every time you build something, it's validated and you go in the right direction. So I think it's a bit of a mess at the moment and a lot of noise everywhere about AI. But I think research is going to be essential into the integration of AI in every organization.
I literally couldn't agree with you more. So a lot of the work that Stripe Partners used to do, right around when I was joining, we worked a lot with Intel, because my manager and one of the founders, Dr. Simon Roberts, that was his background. He was in-house at Intel for a good few many years. And a lot of what the kind of problems that we were asked to solve back then were around, tech for work. How to manage the whole work from home, or like hybrid working environments, how to keep pace like with the working styles, with the new demands of communication and outputs and like deliverables, all this kind of stuff. And that involved a really like deep kind of mapping of people's like workflows, individual workflows, from the arrangement of their desk to the way they set up their sort of screens. All that stuff needs to be there so that you can effectively build for it. And that stuff is so varied by market. Now, with Silicon Valley, that kind of initial promise of 2000s era Silicon Valley, where it's like you just have a sick idea and then you can solve a huge problem and scale hugely. I think with AI, people are still thinking in that term right now. They're like, yes, we just need this amazing product that will give everybody value and then billionaires. But the actual reality is that back then, those interesting, amazing initial ideas, they can only take you so far when you want to scale. You create a product, you create like a Facebook or whatever, you create some kind of entertainment app, whatever it is. And it takes you so far because you've basically really built it for yourself. Your idea of the user is very much influenced by who you are. And then when you actually need to become a global thing, and reach, 3 billion users, well, then you can't do that because people are very different. The issue with AI right now is that there's so much money behind it and there's so much pressure. There's so much pressure for it to become profitable. You need to become a new global thing, which means that actually you don't have the luxury of maximizing like one particular market. Like you can't just be like, this is basically for people in San Francisco and the coasts of America, and I will show value here before then going out globally. No. You've spent all your money on AI now. You need to go global now. So you need to understand the world now. And that involves research. That involves localization. That involves people who have deep, deep cultural knowledge of why people in Japan eat very differently in their sort of spending habits to people who are, in the Philippines, whatever that is. And again, scary in the midterm, scary in the near term, but in the long term, I think the truth always wins. The truth always wins. And when we're researchers, we're in the business of truth, ultimately.
Yep. Very nicely said. I think it's important as well to reassure some of the people, especially in the research field. I think many people are worried about their job and what's going to happen. And what could you say to them, if you wanted to give them some advice with how the world is changing, people who wants to come into research or people in research already, and with this world changing so fast, what would you recommend to them?
Is this aimed at younger people entering the profession or people more established who are worried? I mean, is there a particular kind
You
of
can
level?
decide.
Okay. Well, I like to try and I encourage anyone who is listening to this who is a bit younger, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I try to help, people as much as I can. I briefly was a recruiter for like 1 year, which helped me, I think, help tell those stories when people want to change careers and all that kind of thing. But actually, this is an exciting time. I was speaking on a panel for this Women in Research conference in New Orleans. Sadly, I couldn't go in person. I had to dial in at like 11 p.m. London time. But it was aimed at this. It was aimed at people who do research or people who want to do research, as opposed to like a very established kind of audience. And for them, I would say this. Right now, you need to become strong in your reasons for wanting to do research in the first place. Understand what it is. Is it the fact that you really enjoy working with data? You really enjoy gathering that data, whether it's through surveys, whether it's through whatever it is, but you enjoy that kind of process of getting it and then the process of thinking with it and shaping it, because you need to be able to do both. But be very strong in that, but be very flexible in the methodologies, because right now they're shifting so quickly with AI that there is no best practice. It's almost best principles. So I would say focus on the things that won't change, things like research ethics, things like how to protect people's data, how to approach a problem, how to sort of slice it up and define it properly, how to ensure that you're being rigorous. Focus on that rather than on the craft itself of, I suppose, even things like best practices for how to record something. Right now we're talking via Zoom call, we're using this kind of tool. This wouldn't have been there sort of even 5-6 years ago. Like these things are shifting so rapidly that it's almost pointless to even learn about them. Rather build that solid base of almost philosophical understanding of the point of research and the strength of research. And if you want to make sure that you're kind of up to date in a way that is resilient, keep doing it. Keep doing research, even if no one's paying you to do research. Set yourself little things that you want to find out and then map that process. If you want to sort of understand the future of some product that you use a lot, let's say you love Netflix and you think, well, okay, if I was to be a researcher for Netflix, what would I do? Like assign yourself homework, but then like treat that as an experiment, show your work. And then you can even just talk about it on LinkedIn. You can be like, hey, I was exploring this. And then you can tell that story. And if you do that in a compelling way, you're flexing that same muscle and you're doing it in public as well, which is important because that invites people into your thought process. And so many of these conversations I've had is recently I'm trying to write more on LinkedIn and try to write more on my own newsletter and do that because you never know who can be there. I shared some insights I had from this recent project where I was studying wearables in Europe, in the different capitals of Europe. And it was with Silicon Valley clients. And it was very interesting to them because, I was talking about the assumptions of people and how it's not global. These technologists were very smart, and like cutting edge. But they had this weird assumption that the new tech is going to be always cool. Like people just want the newest thing. And their product was kind of halfway between fashion and technology because it was a wearable device. So that I took them through Le Marais in Paris, and I had a retail expert, like a luxury shopping expert from Paris with me to sort of help answer their questions. And all around us, there were these very fashionable, mainly young women wearing old school Apple headphones, the ones with the wires. And I was like, look, guys, you see that? All these cool people, the kinds of people you want to sell stuff to, none of them are wearing the latest AirPods or anything like that. So if they're not even wearing that, why would they wear your thing? See from their perspective. And then the retail expert said that, yeah, if I was to see somebody who had so much tech on them, I wouldn't think they were very fashionable. I wouldn't think they were very French. And that was like a huge thing for the clients, because they were like, oh, wow, that's the opposite of how I think, And that kind of thing is very important. And then I was sharing that on LinkedIn, and then people joined in, they jumped on that thread, and then it led to a really great conversation I had with a woman who's starting up this wearables company all about female safety, a wearable device there's all around security. So that's what I would encourage people is keep doing research in some form or another. Focus on the philosophy behind it, and then share your ideas in public. My boss, Simon, who I mentioned before, he talks about the approach on LinkedIn or in public spaces should be blogging and not bragging. He gave this whole kind of training to the team about, the old days of blogs, which was quite funny, and how it's all about sharing ideas in a way to invite people in, rather than just being like, obviously people do those congratulations, I'm so honored kinds of posts, blah, 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 that's fine. That's good to keep visible. But if you're sharing something that's interesting and saying, hey, it's a conversation, let's talk about this, then you're going to do great. Sorry, that was a bit of a crazy answer all over the place.
No, it's very fascinating, actually. Make me think a lot, actually. I know we're close to the end, but I wanted to ask you one more question is, where do you see research in the future? You did answer a little bit about it, but I think you can expand a bit.
Yeah. So I think increasingly, if we're talking about user research for tech more specifically, I think I'll keep my answer to that, because right now that's primarily where I'm working. I think a lot of the more tactical questions, things around usability, even things like, I don't know, interviews that would lead to like a customer persona, that kind of stuff. Increasingly, a lot of those questions can be done through AI tools and AI moderators. Like, I know people, I'm friends with people who are like setting up these companies that promise to do AI-powered moderation and analysis and everything like that. And I think for certain kinds of question, that is correct. That is right. And certain kinds of user, that's correct. But then again, it comes down to making sure there's research that does what you said, which is helps you see what's not there. In anthropology, we talk a lot about slippages and how, people fall through the cracks and they don't neatly fit into a model or a framework. And only through the, anthropology or whatever that is, can you actually find those people. I think that's going to become more important than ever. I think someone whose full-time job is researcher, they won't be able to just do usability studies, because then their job will be like managing AI robots, essentially. The real interesting thing will be when the researcher will need to think ahead, project herself into the future, and like understand the gaps and anticipate the gaps of data, and then make sure you get ahead of those. And to do that, you need to have this really flexible approach and a very strong storytelling approach. Because the more powerful people, AI gets, and the more comfortable non-researchers are with using AI to answer their problems, the less they will value research. So you need to be very creative in the ways that you want to make impact with the research. So personally, I'm very drawn to that vision, my own vision, because I love that. I love storytelling and I love a challenge. I'm quite confrontational and adversarial, I like to face something head on. And if I feel like the odds are against me and I'm in a room that's very tough with a lot of people who are like, what are we here? What are we doing? Then I come alive a little bit. I don't like preaching to the choir. So I feel like we're going to have to be really strong and really, really confident as researchers, which is easier said than done. But that means more than ever, we need to be sharing ideas, sharing knowledge, sharing support, and coming together as a research community. That's super important. And there's, obviously conferences and membership networks that are very good for this. So we're very aligned at Stripe Partners with this conference called Epic People, which are you familiar with this
No,
conference?
I don't know them.
Yeah, I can send you more information about that. it's all about applied anthropology, essentially. What's it? I think it's called like ethnography praxis in context. It's all about basically context and culture at the heart of business.
Mm-hmm.
Simon I think he was a founding member of EPIC, but loads of like luminaries of the field of UX speak at it every year. There's also advancing research from Rosenfeld.
We can put in the podcast note, different links as well.
Great.
So I will put that. So every recommendation you can cite, association, group of people. I can add them for the audience actually to explore.
Beautiful. Okay, let's definitely do that. Well, I mean, there's only two I wanted to mention. So there was EPIC, and they have a very high bar for entry. I've even though Simon and they're very kind of aligned with Stripe Partners, it doesn't mean we just get to speak if we want to. They've rejected me like 3 years in a row. It's really upsetting, actually. So there's no
rejected making time in conferences.
Yeah, there's no nepotism, which I can't leverage, sadly. But there's also Rosenfeld Media, which publish a lot of great UXR books or just books in design research. So they have a conference every year, Advancing Research. So I have spoken at that, and I'm speaking at that again in a couple of months. And they're a very, very great community, very active, kind of like Slack channels. But yeah, I hope the kind of future I've painted isn't too worrying. I think whenever there's chaos, there's also there's opportunity. Yeah, exactly. Like we couldn't have had Napoleon without the French Revolution. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that may not be the best example, to be honest.
I'm sorry. I listen to long form history podcasts when I'm trying to sleep. So often my example.
I'm listening a history podcast before us to go to sleep.
Yeah, I was talking to some friends the other day, and I found myself making comparisons to like the Mongol Empire, and I was like, wait, why did I say this? And it's because I've been listening to this stuff. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to see you and have time to talk. We don't do it often, actually. We need to meet up for coffee at some point. Yes. And I wanted to thank all the listeners for listening to the UX Research Club, and I will do another episode next month. And don't forget to put some stars that you like the podcast if you do. And there is also now a possibility to chat within Spotify and Apple. So if you have any question, you can also ask questions. Okay, so thank you very much, and see you next month.
Sounds cool. Great.